would like to introduce, firstly, Cornel Wilczek.
G'day.
Cornel's TV scores include the global hit Clickbait for Netflix, Stateless, and Glitch, both of which won actors for Best Music Score in television. He's done a host of things, Offspring, Nowhere Boys, the Australian hit The Newsmaker, and his feature film work includes Cut Snake, These Final Hours, which won, now I might get the pronunciation wrong, but Best Score at Festival International du Film Fantastique de Jérémie. The Mule, and Academy Award winner Eva Orner's Bikram for Netflix. Also under the moniker Qua, Cornel has released 4 albums and toured the world. He also has a master's degree from RMIT's Media Arts Department, where his research paper centred on using spatial elements as a narrative device. Now, Cornel runs and owns Electric Dream Studio in Melbourne. It's a dynamic collective of composers and engineers that facilitate creative development, broadcast composition, and mixing for TV, film, as well as album production. And on my right, I would love to introduce Petra Salsjö. Did I get that right?
It's close.
Oh, can you correct me?
Salsjö.
Thank you so much. Petra studied improvisation at the Victorian College of the Arts, completed with first-class honours, postgraduate studies in composition in 2014 at Melbourne University, and also at AFTRS. She attended and participated in the Verbier Music Festival Academy in Switzerland and competed at the Montreux Jazz Festival piano competition. Petra has scored The Telegram Man for SBS and a further 25 short screen projects, including documentary feature and a pilot for a TV series. She's been nominated and awarded multiple times for Best Music and Soundtrack Awards and is the recipient of the prestigious ISCM VICC Composer in Residency Program in 2024. Petra is one of the first recipients of the Creditmaker program for screen composers. So let me talk a little bit about Creditmaker. It is a high-caliber initiative to support female practitioners across directing, cinematography, and composing to attain career-defining credit on a scripted production, to elevate their career trajectory, and to bring change in female heads of department representation in the sector. The Creditmaker program was tailored to fit the specific needs of screen composers by the AGSC's Gender Equity Committee, spearheaded by Elizabeth Drake. Creditmaker is supported by Screen Australia's Gender Matters umbrella. Gender Matters is the umbrella name of Screen Australia's efforts to address the underutilisation of female talent in key creative roles in the Australian screen industry. So, welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Dale.
We'll be discussing Petra and Cornel's collaboration as part of the Creditmaker program on Love Me Season 2, which some of you may have seen. It was produced by Angie Fielder and Polly Staniford at Aquarius Films, and correct me if I'm wrong, but executive produced by Warner Brothers International and Foxtel. Is that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll do a deep dive into that collaboration, and also on a second collaboration that eventuated from that, where Petra and Cornel worked on Crazy Fun Park, created by Warner Films and shown on ABC Me and iView. So, Petra, I guess to get the ball rolling, how did the collaboration come about with Cornel?
Well, I was aware of the Creditmaker program, and I also had a friendship with Cornel just through being colleagues and, music composing thing. And basically the collaboration happened because I decided to apply for Creditmaker, but actually it did coincide me contacting Cornel anyway and talking to him about work prospects. So it was kind of a two-handed event, really.
Sure. And so it sounds like a bit of a chicken and the egg scenario, but can you talk through a little bit more about the Creditmaker process? And so once you'd had that conversation, did you have a sort of light bulb moment and think, oh, this could be perfect for the Creditmaker program? And
yeah, I mean, Creditmaker, the thing about Creditmaker was that it gave me the impulse or the impetus to want to make the phone call to say, okay, I've actually got to do this. I can't keep procrastinating about making this contact with Cornel. That was the really useful, it started the conversation. And I'm like notoriously bad at doing that, like at actually picking up the phone and calling sort of hustling.
It's one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah. So it was very significant from that point of view. And also, I kind of knew a bit about Cornel's music, and a very good friend of mine also does work for Electric Dreams, and so I was aware that, you know, it was a place that Cornel would be receptive possibly to the idea of running with the idea of Creditmaker, which not all composers were or are, so, you know, it sort of depends on work and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. How do you think Creditmaker potentially could make a difference for your career?
Well, I think it already has made a difference, because it's imperatively important when you're trying to work in that world, that area of professionalism, to have sort of assured credits that people can, you know, that it sort of qualifies you in the eyes of people who might not know whether or not to take the step to employ you to do music work in that area. So Creditmaker, so from that point of view, acquiring the credit, you know, for a streaming service or whatever it's imperative. Yeah, actually.
Yeah, that's great.
People don't have a lot of, like, sort of sometimes they don't have a lot of creative confidence to make decisions about, you know, a person who's in the arts if they don't have some sort of qualification like that. So that's why it's a very important thing, particularly when you're at a point in your career where you have done a lot, and you may have done a lot of work that was similar to that, but you just haven't got that particular element yet. Yep. So yeah, it's a very important program, I think, from that perspective.
So Cornel, were you already a mentor composer listed on the Creditmaker program, or you became aware of it through conversations with Petra?
That's actually a good question. I didn't know there was a list at that stage. I didn't know anything about it until you called. Yeah, I'm not quite sure, because I think it's fairly early on, and I was speaking with Annie, who was a Creditmaker, and she mentioned it as well, and I think it all happened within one day, pretty much. And I was instantly receptive to it because, one, most of my career I'd been working by myself, and it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I started collaborating with other composers and realised the joy and that takes the pressure off, and how fun it is. And there was a project coming up which was this, that I thought might work really well with Petra style. So it just seemed like a no-brainer.
And can you talk a little bit about, you said 3 years ago you started collaborating a lot with composers?
Yeah. I started working with a composer that I kind of had been working Electric Dreams for a few years, Pascal Babari, and then Tom Rauch, who may or may not be here today, joined, and we started working together on a few more projects, and just loved how collaborating, I feel like as a composer, so many people don't realise how much time you spend by yourself. That's why getting out there and recording with people is so goddamn exciting. You actually get to interact with more people. So, it really transformed things in about, was it 2019, when I started really working with other people, and just realised how important that was, not just for them, but for me. So selfishly, I love this idea.
Yeah, there's something to be said about not just collaborating with people, but also being in an environment where you can, I guess, share ideas and just, you know, play something to someone else that you respect and get their feedback on it.
I feel like the act of just sitting down and listening with people is so beneficial. Just reviewing your work, you know, quickly saying to someone, can you just hear this for a second? What does this remind you of? Or you know, look, I'm having some problems here. Just that act of critical sitting and listening with other people, and then just chatting through ideas that may go on tangents. And, you know, I feel like we're probably both the kings and queens of going on tangents. And just that, you know, how that can fuel ideas is so important, especially when you've been working by yourself. So, yeah, it just seems like the right thing to do. And also, you know, I found it very hard to get into this industry. I wrote to a lot of people and tried to, you know, have some, you know, try to get some sort of mentorship programs, and it was almost impossible. So when there's a chance that I could offer that to someone else, it just felt like the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So you'd already completed one season of Love Me.
Yes.
And by the sounds of it, you know, my question was going to be, you know, having approached it by yourself, essentially as the sole composer, what was it like collaborating with Petra all of a sudden on season 2, and dynamically? Obviously, you've got no problems with collaboration, but it would certainly change the dynamic and the approach potentially to the show. And so maybe you can both talk about what that was like.
Well, first of all, I think the first season I worked a bit with Tom Rauch on it, which was great, because it was the first piano score that I've ever done. I've avoided piano for a long time, and I feel like I gained a bit of confidence recording myself and playing the parts all myself on the first season. And then when Petra sent her work, and I realised that, oh God, we've got a shit-hot piano player here and a great composer, that this seemed like the right thing to do. So I was, you know, I loved throwing some existing themes at you at first and saying how you would interpret and saying, don't, you know, these are the themes. This was their purpose and their narrative purpose last season. How do you want to interpret that? And that was really fun for me to hear.
And that was actually a really good part of it as well. I learned a lot from doing that, from grabbing someone else's piece in this genre and rearranging a piano piece to sort of still make it fit into the idiom that we were working in, but sort of fit it into the texture of the new season. I actually learned a lot from doing that, the arrangement part of it.
Yeah. And did you find that you still had a voice within that?
Me? That's a really good question, because it was a process actually over the course of the season, because I sort of had to adapt to the voice of the score in the first season, which had a particular palette that we discussed, but and every time I tried to do something that was probably a bit out of that parameter, it didn't really fall into the kind of the voice, the musical fabric of the show. So, and that was another great thing actually about the job, was that I did, it forced me to work in this way that I wouldn't have done. And I mean, we had actually a really good conversation about the influences that you were thinking of in the first season. Eric Satie and, you know, sort of Glass.
I think really narrowed down the palette.
Yeah.
That it wasn't even my style either. That's the thing that I enjoyed about it, is that it was really built upon the characters and the story of the first season. So in a lot of ways, I feel like we're all quite alien to its palette, including myself. So it was really nice, kind of trying to find something new in the second season. And then when it came to writing, you know, a lot of the new themes, that was quite tough.
Yeah, it was.
It's a great example of, like I often talk about, being a screen composer and you're subservient to the medium that you're working within, and what you're talking about is how the show itself demanded a certain thing, and you both had to acknowledge that and write to that. And
well, in that way, actually, it was really, in terms of working in the program with Creditmaker, and it was a mentoring situation, and sort of having the opportunity to throw the cues to Cornel and Tom and have this discussion, like that's really invaluable, because you don't get that in many projects really, unless you're working in a team or in some sort of structure. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's a supportive environment. You're not having to present it to a producer first up and get that immediate feedback and maybe a slap down, depending on, how we all write and how we, if we get it right the first time. So that's a great device, and it speaks towards what you were talking about before, about the nature of that collaboration, the privilege within that. It's wonderful.
I think it also it adds to everyone's standard. When you've got people who are scrutinising your work in a loving way, it does really cultivate a kind of commitment to excellence. Maybe is the right word.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like we, also honed in on what this score needed and what was going on in the story, that we could send each other stuff. We weren't working in the same room. We did get together regularly, but we weren't working in the same space. When we were sending each other stuff, we could really hone on in what wasn't and was working, what was too divergent from the palette, what was working. And so I think we're very tuned in to what was needed, and there were a lot of rules that were kind of pre-established. It's interesting working on the second season of something, because you're working with a very defined language.
Yeah.
And
also, just quickly, the other thing is that with working in the team is that by the time it gets to the producers, it has been through all these different ears, like multiple people have listened to it and you've listened to it and there's been all these discussions. So it's not like you're showing it for the first time to the producers, you've actually had this segue.
Yeah, there's a confidence in what you're presenting when you've got other people to share it with. Yeah, so there's a bit of a net that we kind of created, which is a great way. When you're dealing directly with a film studio or directors and producers, can be very intimidating. But the first time in this situation, when you're working with a group, when you're working with a collaborator, you've gotten over the first hump.
Well, on that note, we should watch something from Love Me. We're going to watch two clips. The first is composed by Petra, and the second is composed by Cornel. Once we've watched both of these clips, we're going to drill down about them.
Is Clara pregnant? No. It turns out I'm infertile. Oh. I mean, I'm the one who should be infertile. I'm not meant to be a dad. Being a dad is a privilege. Hi. Sorry.
Kumusta po? Kumusta, ma'am?
Anak, next time I will bring some family pictures for you to put up.
Okay, yep, that sounds great.
Hey.
Hi.
Can we just have one second?
Yeah.
Sobra ba?
Ay, naku, ang daldal mo talaga. Yung mga ganyan, hindi na sinasabi yan.
Hindi ko sinadya. Tapos, itong beer kasi.
Naku.
I want to do this. I want to be a father with you. However it happens. I want to pick up our kid from parties and other disasters. And I'm terrified.
I am too. We might be shit parents.
You won't be.
Oh no, there's every chance I will be. And you might get scared and run away and...
I won't.
You might.
I won't. I've done it before and it was shit. And I won't do it again. I can't. Okay.
Okay, so that's the announcement. Okay.
Well, is it marriage?
Cora!
Mum, Clara and I are going to try for a baby.
You're going to try?
Yeah, I'm going to have some trouble.
It's such a carefully crafted cue, and I think we might have a few conversations about how much consideration both of you have thought about and considered the placement of the notes and the pacing of the music. But maybe first step might be tell us a little about your approach to that cue.
Well, basically, if I speak, I'll speak to it in a sort of general way. So there was a lot of scenes in this show, in Love Me, where the sentiment was a lot about love and fear. And so I sort of had this kind of an sort of connecting thread between every time that I approached the scene, I sort of had this sort of idea in the back of my head about how I wanted to express that. So this scene, I knew it was going to have a piano kind of, the foundation would be piano, and then it needed to be fleshed out, and so I just did that. And I think actually, Cornel, you might have contributed to the fleshing out of that piece.
Yeah, I think I did some extra bits. Look,
Yeah,
these things happen so fast that
Yeah.
we often watch them and go, did we do that? I can't remember. It just happened so quickly.
Yeah.
Just on that, what was the turnaround for every? How long is each ep? Is it half hour or hour?
50 minutes.
Yeah,
55 minutes or so.
So what was the turnaround on each ep from?
It was something like a week.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
It's kind of
a bit looser at the start, and then like that's towards the end of the series. It's probably 5 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About 5 days or so.
And because it sort of goes forward and back a lot, like that they get, like you would finish an episode and then it has to be evaluated and then it goes back and you rework it and then it goes back in again. And by the time it's come back to you, you're already working on the next episode or the one after that. So this overlapping thing. So sometimes it's a bit hard to tell. But that sort of cue is probably like an afternoon, a couple of minutes a day or something, would you say?
Yeah.
For a piece of finished music.
Yeah. And were you both involved in the spotting sessions? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the whole series was temped from the previous season's score. So what we're often, up against, which is every composer's fear is trying to sound like temp music. Well, in this case, everything was from the previous season. So that certainly made it easier if you wanted to rip yourself off. But I can't remember specifically that piece there what was used, but it kind of, from memory, it kind of wrote itself. You did it very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, speed is a big part of the learning process with this whole thing working like this. Just being able to write as effectively and as quickly as possible. And sometimes it's in the rewrites where sort of the music starts to get really interesting if you get the chance to visit that. But this particular cue, like, because because they are so quick, it is hard to remember exactly, you know,
Sure.
what you did all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and with this cue, do you remember, like, was it approved straight away, or was there a bit of an evolution? Was there a rewrite, or?
I think this one was approved straight away.
Right.
But actually, there is something interesting about that, and I was going to mention this, that sometimes when you are really aligned with something that you're watching, or that the acting or story or whatever, you often can write it much more quickly than when you're struggling with what you're looking at.
Yes.
Or listening to.
Yeah.
So sometimes the best cues, I think, on this, there's another cue that maybe didn't make it here, which was the one with Hugo Weaving.
Maybe later.
Yeah. Oh, okay, maybe it is. But it's just the first take, and you know, the essence of the idea is there.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. All right.
The most successful ones were the ones that happened quickly, instinctively, where, you know, less cerebral, more kind of, you know, art. And especially on a show like this, that is a very emotional and simple show. You know, the stuff that happened very quickly was definitely the most successful.
Yeah. And would you, what's your opinion about just talking about if the elements are right, like if the acting's great and the script is great, how does that affect your process?
Yeah. It makes it easier. One, you know, when you have acting that isn't in line with what the production wants, to say it nicely, you don't have to mask something. You don't have to do the heavy lifting that should have been there in the performance. You know, often if something is not conveyed very well, you know, you've got everyone on the composer's back saying, can you make it do this thing that we didn't quite get? And that's hard, because the thing that they're talking about is better served via performance and dialogue. And what we can do, the strengths in what we can do, we know, but we often can't, you know, can't push them in that direction. So, you know, with a show like this with really seasoned actors and some great performances, it's easy. I mean, there were moments where I thought, this scene doesn't need a cue. Like, this is beautiful. This works really well. So that is a big difference.
Yeah, the acting is very good. There's certain, you know, parts in this show that you didn't need a lot of music because the story was being told. It didn't need that underbed, and yeah, less was more, I think.
Well, thank you for a great answer on that. I believe we're ready to watch Cornel's cue now, which is titled Ghosts, I believe.
Yeah, thank you.
Keep a ladder. You sure you don't want to hang on to more?
No, I'm sure. Want to drive?
I couldn't really handle it then.
Lovely, so gentle, and again, the pacing is just, I'm getting a real sense of the pace for the show, even just out of those two cues. Can you talk us a bit through the what that scene was about in your approach to the music in that?
Yeah. It's back into the whole story. That's his wife who had passed away that appears in the background. And it's, talking about pace, like this was a real exercise. The whole show is an exercise in minimalism and less is more and slower tempos. And, this was done so quickly that I barely remember actually doing it. But in my mind, the premise was this was much later. The story had progressed quite a bit, and this is the first time we shifted palette. And it was this idea of, without getting supernatural, this kind of broadcast from the afterlife. And his wife trying to touch him, trying to reach out and express something without being able to communicate. So I really wanted the palette to be a bit, contrasting to everything we've heard. So working with a lot of, even though it's fairly gentle, everything is through distortion. So worked a lot with guitar pedals and running through a guitar and an organ through the distortion pedal. And I just thought that was a nice way to change things up and to kind of this interference passing through this kind of membrane between two dimensions without being something spooky, something quite beautiful. That's my bizarre rationale, and that's it. There's nothing more to it than that, and I just enjoy, instinctive reactions to visuals. Yeah, what's that?
No, that's one of my favourite pieces on the show. It's the way they're waves. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it actually works really well, that music, that music is dispersed throughout the show, and it does work in a number of different ways because of the way the shape of that music. It's a really interesting cue. It's represented this way, but it is represented in other cues. Yeah.
It felt like he was being supported by, like she was supporting him with that music. And can you tell me the transition into him throwing all these things away and her music was carrying through that scene, what that was about?
This idea of, history, presence hanging over, even when he's trying to get rid of things, it's still lingering, and this idea that grief in the show, that especially more on both seasons, but especially in the first season, it's about dealing with grief and how you just got to let it run its course. And that was, I guess, a representation of it running its course. Like, you can let go of a lot of stuff, but it's there, it's going to exist. And this idea of coming in waves too was really important, where you can be fine and then suddenly you have this wave of very strong feelings. And that device of waves was used quite a bit throughout the series.
Yeah. Excellent. I believe a bit of a side question, but I believe Love Me is based on a Swedish series, and I was wondering, I guess before you started season 1, but if either of you had checked that show out before, approaching the score to this, and maybe what the contrast was.
Should have been more prepared, but I didn't watch it. It came at a time where it was like I was busy and I just thought it probably would throw me anyway, so there's no point watching it.
Yeah, it's not always a good idea to do that, of course, to have an original voice with what you want to do.
Yeah. I'd read the scripts though, and that was all I needed, I feel. But you got to watch season 1 before season 2.
That's correct.
And reading the scripts, did you get a sense of the pacing that eventuated in the
Yeah. The scripts read really well, and knowing the director that did the first season too, we'd worked a lot together. That I just knew where it was going, and it turned out exactly as expected. Which I was worried about because I didn't want to do a piano score. I was like, no, I didn't really want to do that, but it just works so well. It was the right move.
Yeah, and it was actually interesting reading the scripts to season 2 because I'd seen season 1 and I wasn't, at that point, I didn't realise how much music would be used from season 1 and shifted over to season 2. And so I did actually have other ideas and did try a lot of different bits and pieces, but yeah, it was pretty clear as soon as we started where it was going to end up.
Mm-hmm.
And actually I'd really like to see the Swedish version. I didn't really know until later that it was based on a Swedish thing.
Right.
Is it called Love Me Too?
Mm-hmm.
It is, yeah.
Yes, in Swedish. Wikipedia told me in Swedish, and I didn't have a chance to translate. But yeah, there you go. Well, we should have a look at a couple more clips, I think. This time, your first cab off the rank, Cornel.
Yep.
A cue called Grief.
Yeah.
Hey. Oh. Okay, it's fine.
Remy.
It was a very quick one.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
The original theme was from another scene, which probably could have played, but yeah, that was the first piece written for the actual show entirely, and it was just this feeling of it was about grief. There wasn't much to it. There's just this idea of this slow pace. Again, the full thing had this idea of it coming in waves, and just the way it kind of affected the family. In this version, it actually came off the back. It's hard to know it in context, but it came off the back of some bad news. And oh boy, I can't remember the original motivations behind it. Again, we worked too fast, don't even remember, but it was a conversation. Well, actually, you once described it quite well when you first started on the show.
Well, I just love the movement at the start. There's beautiful harmonic movement in those first, 4 bars. But this, I mean, we'd have to play it again, but it's very captivating. That,
yeah.
I think I worked it out. I think I learned how to play it. Like, I can't actually remember it now, but it's beautiful. And I'd like to know what inspired you to do that.
I think because I've never recorded myself playing piano before, it was just this idea of, what can I do with my fingers? And just like big intervals were really important, back and forth. But it was also, the first use of it was written for the first scene where the wife had passed away. And the timing was based on his movements, his very slow facial movements. So it was all, again, so much of the work was done by the actors, and Hugo Weaving's performances was so good in that scene. And that just immediately became one of the main themes for the show, because it also became identifiable when you hear those first few notes. You could use it in very different contexts and use it in different keys, and it would still kind of conjure the idea that it originally was meant for.
It's something we don't talk about too often, but that notion of finding rhythm through the actor's nuances is such a key thing. I was talking with another composer, and they were working on a historical drama with lots of British accents, and they were describing how the rhythm of those British accents totally inspired the music and the playfulness of the rhythms in the music.
Yeah. It's like mapping the rhythm of people's motions or their physical presence. You can rhythmically map people, you know, and apply it to music. I think it probably happens more in other genres, you know, not so much in a modern family, emotional drama. But yeah, it's interesting.
And that notion of waves of emotion, this theme or motif, I got a sense that it was maybe part of something slightly larger that kind of came back on itself harmonically.
It was cyclical, yeah. It's this minor, major thing. It's this waves of just absolute grief, and then a moment of being on top of it, and then a moment of comfort, back to sheer grief. And yeah, those feelings that are really hard to describe. Like, you know, honestly, it's not hard to do when you've had someone, you know, important in your life pass away, and you just, going back there is just, it's terrifying, but
Isn't it, I think that grief, this particular piece, you get a lot of, people want to listen to it a lot, don't they? Like, you get a lot of...
Yeah, I can tell by my stats on my site what people are listening to, and this one gets a lot of hits, strangely enough. It's depressing as hell.
Well, I think we're going to listen to your cue next, Petra, which is titled Glen.
Yeah. And some people find a way to let love live alongside their fear, don't they? I've never been able to do that. I'm still no good at it. I'm like you know? Or you're like me. And that means we're loving with limits. Which just seems pointless, isn't it?
I just never want her to suffer, you know?
No. No. But what can you do?
It's another great example of you know, a great scene, great performances, and a beautiful support from the music of what's going on, and just finding those places to inhabit.
That was like a one-take thing. But I just, listening to that, then it's so quiet. Like, you don't have any control over that in the final mix, like where it's going to end up. But that's probably one of my favourite points in this show, I think. Discussion about love and fear. It's so beautiful what they say. So yeah, it wasn't actually hard to write for that at all.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing when we hand over our work and it gets mixed, and it's always fraught with fear, I think, from a composer's perspective of how it's going to be treated and where it ends up in relationship to everything else. Yeah, you really don't have much say in it, I don't think.
No. Well, you know, when we are at a mix, you know, it's you know, this show did happen fairly quickly. We weren't really at the mixes, which is unfortunate. But usually we are, and we can get there. And I like to have a lot to say.
Perhaps if you know, directors and producers are watching this, they might be rolling their eyes, and composers, they always want to turn up the music, but I don't think that's true. I mean, I've been at mixes, and I'm sure you have too, where we make critical decisions about the music coming down and maybe even disappearing as well.
Yep. Last week was at a mix, cut out a cue and made things lower. You know, and then the week before probably making things louder. So whatever you need, really, whatever is serving the story best is the right thing. And to be honest, that is quiet, but it's very effective. Like, it's a subtle performance, and it's still very present.
Yeah.
I think it works really well.
Speaking of the pianos, what was the consensus on the piano sound, and were you recording, because I know you were all separate in your studios, were you recording different pianos, or did you consolidate into one piano sample sound that you all were using, or what was the process?
I think we all recorded it on our own sounds individually, and then it did go into a final. I think Tom took care of most of the end.
Oh, there was a few different things. I mean, there was some stuff that was recorded on my piano at home. There was some, there was a couple of sample libraries. There's a whole bunch of things going on, and it wasn't just one sound. There was quite a few different things going on, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, because there's subtle differences, but there's a cohesion to the sound, which works really well for the show. So, speaking of recording, were there other musicians on this show? I mean, many times there's either not the time or the budget for live music, but I'm just wondering what was involved there.
Yeah, being such a simple palette, it was just us. It was just me, Petra, and Tom playing everything. I don't think we used anyone else.
No. But we all play sort of a few instruments, so that did cover quite a bit, you know.
You use vocals a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Your own vocals?
Yeah.
Great.
It was beautiful, yeah.
I guess you've answered this previously, Petra, but I wonder if there's anything else to add. Just what other things did you learn from working with Cornel and Tom and through this process?
I think one of the key things I learned was effective communication. So, and how important it is to keep everyone on the same page. And so there was fantastic ways that were set up to do that. So we all knew exactly what was going on at the same time. And it really did support the music making process and for it to be very fluid and fast because the communication was very effective. And also the amount of communication between the music department and the other departments to do with the show. I was really taken aback at how fantastic Cornel and Tom were at delivering the cues with a lot of explanation so that no one was left wondering what might be going on or, what this was or what had changed. There's constant updates. It wasn't just like, I'll just slap this out and, this is what's happened. And it was very clear all the time. Yeah. That was a real eye-opener, actually, aside to the music stuff. Yeah.
Am I sensing spreadsheets here, Cornel?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love spreadsheets. I'm a bit disappointed you didn't mention that first. Spreadsheet, I feel like I run my life off of spreadsheets, and I feel like once you get that stuff sorted, it just means that when it comes to actually writing music, you've got all of your notes there, you've got your time code, all of the stuff that you need, so you can just let go and write without wondering what you've got left to do. Am I doing this right? What did they say again? What did I think again when I first saw it? Your first instinctive thoughts are really important. And if you lose those, you don't record that, you don't write that down, you're missing a big trick with screen composition, because I feel like first instincts are everything. So getting all that stuff into spreadsheets is just brilliant. And then you can let go, and then you can, you wake up and you go, okay, I'll look at the spreadsheet, what do I have to do today? And once you get the formal stuff out of the way, you can just then indulge and never have to worry about the formalities until the next one. So yeah, it's really important.
Do you share the spreadsheet with your clients as well?
It depends. Sometimes it's just for us. Yeah. Sometimes it can become, when I have shared it with certain people, it's become a can of worms where they start inputting too much of their own ideas. It's like, no, let us do our thing first.
Yeah.
And then we can talk.
That's the advantage of sharing cells.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's really important. But because
that's really important.
Because do your work, and then do you communicate properly, because you know what you were intending to do all along. Because you know what you know. When I first started, I feel like it's just a bit when I first started, I feel like it's just about half an hour of music to write. Where do I start? Half an hour of music is a great place to start. Where do I start? Well, this is a great place to start.
So let's talk a bit about Crazy Fun Park, your second collaboration. So clearly the first collaboration went spectacularly well because you went on to do another one. So how did it come about? Was it while you were still working on the other show, or?
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a crossover. Yeah, it just was, I think, a score that I really, really enjoyed and put a lot of development into with the director and showrunner. But there were a few cues that I just felt like, after knowing Petra's work, that you would just nail. So again, I don't want to pigeonhole you at all, because I know you do so much more than that, but there were these kind of pieces that I felt like were best served with piano, and I just thought, oh look, I'll throw them to you and see what you think. And hopefully, I feel like I must have described them well, because your first, versions were spot on, and there were a couple of pivotal cues in a couple of episodes that were great, really inspiring.
Can you tell me a bit about the show? Tell us about the show.
Yeah, it's like a gothic horror / comedy for teens, and it's a very odd show, but it's about danger and risk taking, and in this case it doesn't really pay off because one of the characters dies, but you've got to take risks. You've got
Spoiler.
Yeah, sorry. It's quite a heavy show, made with a very colourful light hand, which I really enjoyed. And it was just such a unique story that I thought it'd be fun to kind of make the music as colourful as possible.
Okay.
And they approach a lot of different themes for teenagers and sort of young adults that are quite complex, and they do it in the realm of the crazy fun park and what happens in there at night. And there's there's a lot of gothic kind of deadness in it and stuff like that. It's good. It's a really good show, actually.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, it was a fun way of explaining very complicated teenage issues without being patronising, but just Nick Verso, the creator and director, just has a deep love for, just knows what it's been like. He's written for teens better than anyone else that I've ever seen or heard, and also his influences and his aesthetic were really aligned to quite a colourful gothic score, which was super fun.
Great, we should have a look. Okay, well, the first one we have is Petra's cue, titled Auntie.
You better watch that little judgem.
You don't have to go.
Oh, bub.
Please. I was thinking, if you died here, you could stay with me. You can, for real. I'd make your room up in that. Or you can have my heart.
Just because mine's broken doesn't mean it's not working. This isn't my place. I need to go home. Back to our country. And one day so will you. And I'll be waiting. When you're ready.
I'm sorry.
What are you sorry for?
For making me sad because I died.
Hey, I need you to look at me, Nimrod. I'm sorry you've had to carry this all these years. It was never your job to worry about me. That was mine. I could never have kids. So do you know how deadly, and I mean deadly, it was to be your mum? You've got your head on straight. You've built yourself up. You got friends who love you. Respect. You don't ever have to be sorry. I need to go. And put a jumper on. It's cold.
I could hear a little homage to carnival theme parks in there somewhere, I think. Do you want to talk about, I mean, it's so hard watching a scene out of context without the, the pre-story and so forth, but clearly that was a big moment in this production. And, do you want to talk about leading to this moment?
Well, it's actually, so in the theme park, multiple people, well, everyone is dead and they come alive at night. I don't want to give too much of it away. So, but sometimes they get visitors from, family members and all that sort of stuff. This scene was about that. And so the theme that I wrote, I actually sort of kind of called on my more songwriting background to write that piece of music.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not speaking about it very well, but yes. So it was more of a less of a sort of scoring kind of accompaniment, and more of I wanted to move the music around the dialogue in a song-like way, if that makes sense. So yeah.
And was that theme from somewhere else, or it was you introduced it at that point?
I just introduced it at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was used in one other scene earlier on, and it was like the auntie theme. And I feel like my brief to you was, this was quite a really bombastic kind of episode. It was this little moment, this little kind of, reprise from everything going on, and almost like a fairy tale moment. And talking about the carnivalesque stuff, that I think that's permeated through the whole score, because that was a big part of it, trying to create this world that, is this eternal theme park that, just turned on every night. And part of my brief to you was to do something almost fairy tale-ish between them, like a little kind of love story between an auntie and nephew. And it's just, in terms of the actual episode, it's quite an affecting moment, because you've just been blasted with all this kind of big music in this episode, and then you have this, it knows how to get soft.
Yeah, it's such an important tool of our trade, isn't it? Just creating these sort of moments, especially if it is like such an intense experience all around it, and crafting moments that give the audience a break just to immerse themselves into the story.
Yeah, that break aspect is really important in something like this, when you just, it's wall-to-wall music. It was wall-to-wall music, the show, so to have music that gives you a little bit of a break was really important.
Lovely. Well, we should hear your cue, Cornel, which is an amalgam of dawn and end titles.
I guess you got to come back now.
This isn't one of those too good to be true dreams.
Oh, you miss me that much, huh?
What? No. Your mum does. You need a better comeback.
We'll be here at sunset. Every day.
Friends for another day?
Friends for another day.
It was very cinematic, like that whole ending.
It was a really crazy big episode that was mostly action music because it was all about the danger of this is the first time that his friend went to Crazy Fun Park and discovered what had happened, and he was put through all these trials that were quite dangerous, that they were basically trying to kill him. So this was a moment of, where he was kind of accepted into the community, and it was just this, I really wanted to change the palette and go very cinematic with it, very slow cinematic, and kind of explain that the magic of this place, and then we get a taste of what the rest of the score was like at the end with the main theme. I just realised that probably wasn't the finished piece that I played there, because I ended up recording that piece with Real Marimba at the end. That sounded a little bit different, but anyway, maybe next time I can play the right one. It was a wall-to-wall music episode, so this was a chance to kind of offer something different and kind of engage in a different way by doing a very different palette at that point. Yeah, it's one of my little favourite scenes. It was a very genuine kind of moment between them. I think they're both amazing actors. I don't know what you can tell from that little moment, but it's really beautifully, the show was really beautifully made, particularly that episode I thought was pretty perfect.
And how did you come around to that theme? Like, what was the brief to write that theme? Because I love the theme at the end. The end.
Oh, it actually, again, came from something that happened earlier, and it was scoring to a particular kind of action at the beginning of the first episode, and we're like, hey, that's really good, that should be the main theme. So it was a little action piece at the beginning of the first episode where they scared someone off that was in the fun park. The lights turned on, he went running, and then the big lights turned on there. Anyway, it was just all about the timing of one of those moments, those serendipitous moments where you kind of time everything to the action. You're like, oh, that's a theme. It was nothing more than that. It's just writing to the screen, and that was it. And then I got my daughter to sing on it, and got her friends to add some extra vocals, and they didn't get paid. No, they did. In dinners.
How is it working with small children and recording them?
Surprisingly good. Yeah, they were really receptive. I feel like telling children, do you want to be on TV? It works pretty well. Plus, she's very interested in my work, so she's always hovering over my shoulder. And by the time I asked her to sing on it, she was very familiar with it.
Right.
And knew exactly what she wanted to do. So, I mean, I gave her direction with, how to kind of characters and things with her voice that she could do, but I didn't need to at all. She had it all down, and I'm scared about what she'll be able to do by the time she is my age. Yeah, pretty great. Yeah, I often get kids to work on stuff.
The question to you now is, would you consider doing it again? I suppose, are there any considerations for other composers if you were to talk to them about that?
Yeah, I definitely think, I would be interested in doing it again, and I would be interested in a lot of different kind of collaborations. And it all depends on the composer and the project. This just was very fluid. It felt like the right thing to do. With the right project in mind, absolutely. I feel like the thing that I feel like the thing that you've come away with too is maybe a better understanding of the industry and just putting stuff together. I feel like the compositional side you had down, like that wasn't, it was maybe more, interpreting. I had a better understanding of the narrative because I worked on the first season, and that was probably the thing I could steer certain directions, but it was more about the formalities that are really important, how to navigate politics of people and how to present works and how to talk about them. And also, the spotting side of things, a lot of big decisions that happen in music spotting are really important, and you do have an influence over that, and when to speak up, when to, say that, no, that's not working, or, how about this is really important. That confidence to speak up is really important. So I hope that that's one of the things that helped a lot.
Yeah, definitely. It is getting that insight into the whole process that you don't, you wouldn't have it. And Creditmaker actually did create the pathway for that to happen. So, yeah, that's what I actually feel I have. Having that exposure to that side of the industry is the big thing. And then all the mechanisms that go with that.
Yeah, it's so critical, and it takes years to learn that stuff by yourself, and to get that direct injection into someone like Cornel's business and his approach and his knowledge that he's acquired. It's a great story. And
just to speak to that too, it's an incredibly generous offering for a composer to open up their world and allow another composer to come in and take a snapshot of their business, their music business, and all. It's an incredible opportunity, and not everyone's got the facility to do that, and not everyone wants to do it. And so, I have to thank you, Cornel, very much for that.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. And thank you both for being on Composer to Composer. Thanks,